Left of the box. People who were tuned into my last live stream, Mark, a Twitter peep of mine who has been on my live stream before, came on because the Canadian federal budget had just come out, and one of the biggest disappointing things in it was what they did with the Disability Benefit Act, because they've been promising and promising and promising that there would be a disability benefit that would help people with disabilities, get them out of poverty, all this sort of stuff. Because, think way back when COVID started, CERB, the Canadian Emergency Relief Benefit, came out, $2,000 a month for Canadians. Unless you have a disability, then you didn't get that. And most people who rely on disability payments, we rely on about half of that. And so we are forced to live in dire, dire poverty. So this disability benefit was supposed to help alleviate that. So the budget came out, and this was included in it. They didn't listen. They did not listen to anyone who talked to them, who told them what we need. What they ended up doing was $200 extra a month for people living with disabilities if you qualify for the disability tax benefit, which is less than half of the people who need to rely on disability payments. Very disappointing for a lot of people. As I said, it was hard for me to be disappointed when this is kind of what I expected would happen. That it would just be another slap in the face. This isn't going to help a single person get out of poverty who lives with disabilities. Nobody on the rates that we currently have, an extra $200 will still keep you in dire poverty. That's how bad it is. And meanwhile, so we get, like here in Ontario, I think they've just increased it to $1,400 a month. Keep in mind that's rent for most people. When you have the MPs and MPPs, so members of parliament, members of provincial parliament, they get benefits for their job, which include about $1,000 more than what we get per month on housing allowance alone. So $2,300 a month for housing allowance, let alone their actual salary and other benefits and all that sort of stuff they get. They get $2,300 a month just for housing. And meanwhile, people with disabilities in Ontario are expected to get by on $1,400 a month. That's if you get the maximum amount. Absolutely ridiculous. So there was just a few follow-up things that I wanted to get to with that. Liberals are smug. They're just smug. There's like a lot of really cursy words that I want to say right now when I talk about the smugness of liberals and how much I despise how they're patting themselves on the back for this, because they are, thinking they've done this great thing. So here's this one saying, Budget 2024 includes the Canada Disability Benefit as one of the largest line items at $6.1 billion, which will provide support to individuals living with disabilities. We need to do more, and PTs need to step up to increase. So they're talking about provinces and territories, and not claw back their assistant programs. And that's odd. That's a politician. Accounts who only follow or are mentioned can reply to this. Gee, I wonder why. And yeah, blocking replies because they know people aren't happy about this $200 a month. It's not a benefit, it's an insult, and it really is. And we'll get a little bit more into why. So we have here Michael J. Prince, and he tweeted out, effective immediately, I've resigned from Ministers Kamala, I'm not sure how to say her last name, Kira, Disability Advisory Group. I'm deeply disappointed in Budget 2024 provided for the Canada Disability Benefit. Read my full letter here. So he is a professor at social policy at UVIC, so probably that's the University of Victoria, I would imagine. Political scientist, disability advocate, media pundit, award-winning author, all that sort of stuff. So he was on the advisory group to help design this disability benefit. He resigned because of how inefficient this benefit is. So let's just say I'm writing to give my formal notice of my resignation to the Minister's Disability Advisory Group effective immediately. My decision is based on the government's design choices for the Canada Disability Benefit announced in this week's budget. The budget fails to heed the long-declared recommendations by national disability organizations and other groups for a properly funded benefit, one that recognizes additional cost of living people with disabilities. So on and so forth. The government estimates that more than 600,000 low-income persons with disabilities will see an increase to their financial well-being. This number falls well short of the estimated 1.2 million persons with disabilities across Canada living with poverty. In contrast to the previous statement about the intended effect of the Canada Disability Benefit, there is no mention here of having significant poverty reduction effects. And the thing is again, the $200 doesn't actually get people out of poverty. That's how dire poverty people with disabilities is in, that the extra $200, it gets you an extra trip to the grocery store and maybe pays down part of a bill. Skip to the end of it. So basically, I conclude that my voice is no longer making a difference on this advisory group, so I resign. And we'll get a little bit more into some of the stuff that he has said on it. So Mike Morrice, he's a Green MP, and he's a good MP. I've done plenty of stories on him, and I'm hoping to try to get him back on my show. He's been on my show. I want him back on his show. And he has been a very, very strong advocate for people living with disabilities. And he has been fighting this, and he's been very vocal on it. So the Green Party can be hit and miss with the people who are in it. And as I've mentioned on my channel way back when I was first covering him running for office, is he didn't win because he's a Green Party member. He won because people like him. He did the work. It was the second time he attempted that he actually got a seat, but he did the work. He put the effort in. He got the connections with the community. And so he's one of the rare politicians that was elected in because people like him. Most politicians are elected in because of their party. So that's just an indication of the type of person he is and how strong of an advocate he is. We have this statement from Mike Morrice, $35 billion for the TMX pipeline, $18 billion in handouts for big oil last year alone. Yet in budget 2024, they didn't step up to keep their promise to the disability community. It's past time to stop making excuses and do right by people with disabilities. I'll keep pushing.
We've had this conversation dozens of times in this House over the last 3 years. I've heard time and again about a need for time for the regulations, negotiations with provinces and territories, nothing without us, we need to do more. The difference now is that with this budget, their cards are on the table. There was a dollar amount in that budget, and that dollar amount was $200 a month. This government set the expectation that this benefit was meant to lift people out of poverty. And they find money for the Trans Mountain Pipeline. They find $35 billion for that. They send $18 billion to oil and gas companies that are already making tens of billions in record-breaking profits. But when it came time to step up and demonstrate that there was well-placed trust from the disability community, they were let down. And so my question to the Parliamentary Secretary is she and others going to put pressure on this government to expand what was in the budget and do better?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I really appreciate the advocacy of the member. As I've said, I myself have a nephew who has severe disabilities, and right now.
Again, the smugness of the Liberals is just basically, she just did the whole, well, I know someone who's in that group. I have a friend, I have a family member that's in that group. Like the person saying, oh, well, I have a Jewish friend, or I have a black friend. Oh, I have a nephew with a disability, so I can speak on behalf of them.
Now, in his first 5 years of life is when he needs the most support to be able to grow and to live a functioning life. I completely understand the need to ensure that the disability community has that support that they need so that they can continue to flourish and to thrive in a community that is barrier-free.
The $200 does not accomplish that.
And Mr. Speaker, during these past 8 years, we have invested unprecedented amounts of money to further the inclusion and the financial stability of persons with disabilities.
A lot of that money has actually gone to corporations to try to make the corporations more friendly to certain people with certain disabilities, to have like get back to work job programs.
This Canada Disability Benefit represents the largest single item in Budget 2024 of over $6 billion. This is not insignificant, Mr. Speaker, and this is the first time in Canada that there will be a federal benefit designed to specifically meet the needs of people with disabilities. And
it does not meet the needs of people with disabilities.
Like all progressive programs that we've delivered, they are built to be enhanced and to be expanded. And I look forward to working with the member to ensure that.
And while we're waiting for this to be expanded and have to fight tooth and nail to get that done, there are people who are suffering and won't make it. Quite literally, that's how bad the poverty is. That's the thing, like we don't have time to wait for them to slowly get it up to a livable rate. So Michael J. Prince. So again, he's the person that sent in this resignation letter because he was working on the Disability Advisory Board. And he has a couple things. So that the federal government is not innocent in this income insecurity of people with disabilities, a quick history. The minister here was just saying, oh, this is the largest investment with people with disabilities, the first one, blah, blah, blah. Not really. Not really.
The details announced in the budget left many advocates disappointed, including my next guest. Michael Prince quit the minister's disability advisory group after the budget was tabled, saying he felt his voice wasn't being heard. And Michael Prince joins me now. Michael Prince, thank you for taking the time. You were listening in on most of that interview, I think. I wonder what your takeaway is from what the minister had to say in terms of explaining how she sees this program.
Thank you, David. Well, first of all, this is not actually the first statutory program of a federal government delivering income support to people with disabilities. We can go back to just after World War I with veterans benefits for disabled veterans. In the 1930s, the federal government started to provide income support to Canadians who were blind. And in the 1950s, we had the Disabled Persons Act that was enacted. So there is a long history of federal government leadership on providing income support to different groups of people with disabilities. The other thing the minister said about the provinces need to step up. Well, again, just a quick little history. In 1996, a previous Liberal government terminated what was called the Canada Assistance Plan. David, you might remember this is a program where the federal government cost shared 50-50 with the provinces in funding provincial social assistance. And in most provinces, the single largest group on provincial social assistance are people with disabilities. So the government of Canada actually stepped away from funding provincial welfare programs for disabled Canadians almost 30 years ago. So the idea that the provinces have been chronically underfunding, that might be the case, but the federal government is not totally innocent in that claim. And so I think it's a bit of a distraction to lay the blame all on the provinces. There has been a historic role by the government of Canada for many, many decades for a variety of groups with disabilities. What groups were looking for with the new Canada Disability Benefit was a return by the federal government to a more meaningful, robust leadership role in providing income support to people clearly in deep poverty. So as you said, this was greeted with tremendous widespread disappointment and dejection by disability groups last Tuesday.
A note that I mentioned when I was talking about this when it first got announced and Mark was on my show is mentioning that a lot of the provinces actually held back increasing rates to people with disability because they were waiting for this federal disability rollout so that then they wouldn't have to spend more money on, making sure that people have enough necessities, basic needs to live. They wanted to pass it off to the federal government. And now that the federal government's plan is completely underwhelming, Again, that's years of not keeping up with inflation. Like, even when they increase it, it's rarely ever enough to cover inflation. In fact, I don't recall the last time it is. Because sure, they might increase the rate a certain amount, but my rent will go up, and usually gobble that increase up. So he had a little bit more to say. So relying on the disability tax credit to determine eligibility for Canada disability benefit will result in disturbing segmentation of the included and excluded among low-income people with disabilities. So this is what I was saying before, that you have to qualify for the Canada disability tax benefit. And one of the things you need for that is a family doctor. And if you don't have that, then it's very hard for you to apply for it. And even if you apply for it, doesn't mean that you're going to get it. So, like I said, like he said, like I've said, it's less than half of people who rely on disability that actually qualify for this benefit. So it's less than half of people who live with dire poverty that are going to get just the extra $200 a month.
And as you say, $200 a month. The reason for that, and I think the low number of 600,000, which would be a maximum number under, I think, current projections, is that relying on the disability tax credit, which again has real limitations, really provides benefits through the tax system to people with reportable income for taxation purposes. So again, for low-income Canadians with disabilities, this leaves out hundreds of thousands of adults with disabilities across the country. So that's kind of, they've chosen an instrument, the DTC, the disability tax credit, that by itself has this ceiling. So it's really leaving at least 50% of those clearly in poverty out. So this is a very kind of disturbing segmentation and picking of the most, not necessarily the poorest, because some of those who are poor were not going to be eligible at all under the DTC. So this isn't like doing the most needy, David. This will be those who can actually qualify under a rather stringent eligibility criteria and medical documentation to get eligibility. So
there were so many people waiting on this disability benefit, hoping that it would be the saving grace, the thing that they needed to just help get by every month. And then for the government to come out with this was just devastating. So the Tory, the left, the Canadian Radical said the NDP proposed $2,200 a month benefit and settled for $2,000 less in exchange for propping up a genocidal party in confidence votes. Shake my head. And so, yeah, it's part of Jagmeet Singh's plan to prop up the Liberals, to keep them in power so that there's not an election called. And part of it was, well, he wanted $2,200 a month for people living with disabilities. And that would have actually helped get people out of dire poverty. It would literally help save lives. It would help save the quality of life of people, for the people who are just living in complete destitute and misery. But Jagmeet Singh has just been not taking advantage. He's not been playing the cards well. He's not been playing the political game well. To be in the position that he's in, to prop up the Liberals, and fall so flat. At the same time, I don't exactly want them not to prop up the Liberals right now, because the alternative is Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives. And we're going to get a little bit more into him, but he's just so much worse in so many other ways. So really, this is just me again saying I'm just severely disappointed in Jagmeet Singh. I had a lot of hope for him when he first got elected as leader of the NDP, and he has just completely fell flat on that.